Well, we turn now to week 2 of this course, moving from the Anglo-Saxon period across the divide of the Norman conquest of 1066 and into the Middle English period. The term Middle English refers to the language in which the material was written originally. In other ways, we might refer to this period of time in literary history as the high medieval period or the late medieval period, and in fact some people draw a distinction between the Anglo-Saxon period or Old English and the Middle Ages, which coincides for some with the later Middle Ages. In our thinking, we have left week 1, the Old English period, behind, and we're now looking at the literature of later medieval England, generally circumscribed by the dates of about 1100 to 1500. This is the time of Chaucer, and this is the time of the great medieval romances, including, quite importantly, the developments of the Arthurian tradition, the stories of King Arthur and Camelot, the quest for the Holy Grail, and so forth. This week's material is confined to one major poetic work in Middle English, and that is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, a medieval romance written probably in northwest England sometime after 1350, probably during the 1370s or 80s. We can't be sure. The dialect in which the poem was originally written is a difficult dialect of of Middle English, in which there are a great number of Old Norse and Old French loanwords that are not found elsewhere. The language of Chaucer, who we're not reading for this course, is a much more sophisticated and refined literary language, owing to the fact that Chaucer lived in London and wrote in the London dialect. Not so the unknown or anonymous author of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, who, as I said a moment ago, lived in the northwest of England and seemed to be familiar with the landscape around there, and his language betrays his rather, how shall we say it, rustic origins and his provincial approach to things. Just a few comments. As I said, the author of the poem is unknown. Some people think he may have been a minor member of the aristocracy, owing to the fact that he seems to be familiar with matters of court and courtly procedure. On the other hand, he may well have been a minor cleric, possibly a parish priest, who had as his parish a rural district in northwest England, and who was familiar with some of the doctrinal and theological and moral questions that are confronted in the poem. So Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is set in King Arthur's Camelot. The text was written about 100 years before Sir Thomas Malory wrote his lengthy prose version of the Arthurian tradition, the Arthurian legend, which will form the subject of our next week's reading and discussion and writing. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a 4-part work. It begins in Camelot about Christmas time. It ends in Camelot shortly after New Year's Day on the following year. In the middle, there is a section that describes Sir Gawain's adventurous journey from Camelot to the shall we say it, the court of Lord Bertilac, whose castle is called the Castle of Haute Desert, the Castle of High Deserving or High Merit. The third section of the poem is the longest section, the most important section of all, that describes Sir Gawain's strange and difficult adventures in Lord Bertilac's castle. I'll tell you in advance that Lord Bertilac's wife, Lady Bertilac, provides Sir Gawain with a significant series of tests in the form of temptations. And the essay on this subject that was written by J.R.R. Tolkien who is also the translator of this version of the poem for this course. According to J.R.R. Tolkien, the 3 days of testing inside the castle are the moral core and the center of the plot, the most important segments of the poem. Sir Gawain is known in elsewhere in Arthurian literature as a ladies' man, but as a very courteous ladies' man who knows all the correct procedures and eloquent behaviors that a chivalric knight should manifest while relating to a lordly female, a lady. In this poem, Sir Gawain's reputation as a great lover and a great purveyor of romance is tested. One of the things I'd like you to watch for as you read this poem is the issue of conflicting loyalties. And in fact, there are 3 main directions of loyalty or obligation that Sir Gawain is confronted with, or the conflict of which confronts him. Number 1, he is loyal to his lord. He's loyal to King Arthur. And then while he is away and a guest in the court of Lord Bertilac, he's supposed to be loyal to Lord Bertilac. As an honored guest, he owes allegiance to and respect for his host. Secondly, he is obligated, Sir Gawain is obligated to be loyal to God. The chivalric tradition of the later Middle Ages, of the 14th century in England, was a tradition that was conceived of in terms that represented and reflected Christian morals and Christian ethics. In fact, during this period of time, there were codes of behavior that were written up, chivalric codes that specified a number of things that a chivalric knight should be good at, and they include matters of religious devotion and penitence and so forth. Thirdly, Sir Gawain owes some kind of allegiance to an ideal of romantic love. That is to say, he has obligations toward ladies who might or might not be the objects of his romantic affections. In this poem, these 3 loyalty codes, or these 3 directions of obligation, come into conflict with one another. One last thing I want to say about the poem is that it is a poem in which the idea of game playing plays a very significant role. The outer plot of the poem is, in effect, a game of exchanges between one person and another. Sir Gawain is invited to play a game with the Green Knight, and the game consists of a series of axe strokes. In this game, Sir Gawain is invited to take the first stroke of the axe against the Green Knight, who has presented himself to King Arthur's court at Christmas time. The second half of the game is an away game, so to speak, for Sir Gawain. He then has to go and take a return stroke from the Green Knight against him. This outer plot frames the structure of the poem, but then within the plot, in the various sections of the poem, there are also, in a more minor way, games that are played between characters. Some of these games are Christmas games, games of entertainment at the court. Others of them are much more serious games. One of them is a game that's played between Lord Bertilac and Sir Gawain while he is resting in the castle of Haute Désert. And the game is one of an exchange of winnings. It's like a gift exchange, appropriate for Christmas time. For Sir Gawain, whatever he wins at any game playing in the castle during the day, he is supposed to give as a present, a Christmas present, to Lord Bertilac at the end of the day. Meanwhile, Lord Bertilac goes out into the field to hunt, and on the 3 days of Gawain's stay, Lord Bertilac claims quarry. He hunts various animals, and at the end of the day he presents his winnings, or the quarry that he has taken, as a present to Sir Gawain. So there's an exchange of gifts at the end of each day. This becomes very complicated on the third day. And then finally, when Sir Gawain goes to present himself to the Green Knight for the return stroke of the axe, things get very complicated and surprising. I won't spoil the surprise in case you've never read the poem. The poem was translated by J.R.R. Tolkien, who was a scholar of Old English and Middle English language, and who wrote a very interesting rendering of the poem. I hope you enjoy it, and happy reading. I also wish you well on the test and the essay that you'll be writing.